And finally, the bike has arrived. It's just been taken out of its box, and in this video, I'll put it together. As much assembly as needed will be done to it. It gets wrapped up like so, frame and forks. The handlebar is sideways on. It's got a box of who knows what with it, and a set of tires. These are the Nobis, gravel tires or whatever you want to call them, with Presta tubes inside. What's installed on the bike is the road tires with this kind of fishbone profile on it, and without taking any of the foam off, it's looking already fast without going anywhere. And this is how it looks like, and I think you'd agree with me, it is stunning. Tour de France yellow. So let's have a look at the instructions here for assembly. Let's start with the pedals. Of course, it doesn't come with a pedal wrench, so you're gonna have to supply your own. Pick one and put the pedals in. The left side and the right side are threaded differently, so they need to be dealt with accordingly. Don't cross thread it. You'll be unhappy if you strip the thread in the aluminum crank. On the non-drive side, the pedal tightens with a downward pressure, and I want to point out there is a really, on this Wellgo pedal, there is a seal right here that can look sometimes crinkly like this. So if it does, or if it changes shape easily, or if it gets deformed or whatever, can get pinched like this, that's just how it is. Just live with it as you rotate the spindle on the pedal. So just do your best not to compromise that seal as much as possible. This is how it looks like. It is what it is. And on the drive side, the wrench tightens the pedal by turning it that way. When you look at it from where I sit, it's not mentioned anywhere here, but you need to lace in the clip. So this is how lacing the toe clip looks like in this configuration. It doesn't slip, so it goes through a lower slot through the outside or outer part of this buckle, and it returns over the serrated surface there. So very simple, in through the narrow slot and up and over backwards. So this way, and when it's easy to adjust it. It runs enough, but once it's spring loaded in this configuration, this is holding really well here. So right after the pedal assembly, on the next page of the assembly manual here, handlebar assembly. And this is where things are gonna get a little trickier. The instructions say that you need a single 5mm Allen key to work on 2 bolts. Over here I have the bicycle fully assembled, and if you remember, the handlebar was turned sideways and the end of the handlebar was turned underneath the top tube here. That's significant because it stays together that way for shipping, but that also means that you have to loosen these 4 bolts there with an additional, not mentioned in the assembly manual here, with an additional 4mm Allen key, the small one that you need for these bolts. So I can't really sugarcoat it. I'm just telling you, this is what you need, this is what it is. Obviously, turn the stem 90 degrees sideways and line it up with the rest of the frame. And this is kind of there. Haven't finished tightening it yet. And you have to center the handlebar side to side. There are some lines here that can help you visualize where the middle is a little bit, but your best bet is probably to measure from either the center or the outside edge to the center line here, as you can also eyeball and measure it from here again to the center line. Make sure that the side-to-side measurement is identical to the center of the stem, and then put the stem. This needs a little turning, a few degrees, because it's slightly off. So I'm not done here. Also, so you can tighten these bolts sensibly by turning the small wrench. And of course, if you want precision, you are going to need a torque wrench. If you don't know how to use it, or you don't own one, it will work sensibly with the small wrenches. But just for the comparison's sake, here is an adult bicycle. The manufacturers do have a torque specification in mind. That's not 55 Newton meters of torque. I believe that's 5.5. So the steering stem has been straightened to be in line with the top tube. To the center, it's 7.5 inches one way, and it's the same 7.5 inches the other way. And the bicycle's front wheel is just clamped between my knees. Very simple here. You might think we're done with the handlebar, but there's one other thing that's visible from this angle here. The top of the handlebar is ideally, say, level with the ground like this. So if it's dropping forward, it's really uncomfortable to hold on to it. And if at this level position, the reach is too much for the rider, so from wrist to shoulder to hip, if it's hurting the lower back here because the reach is too much forward, then the handlebar can also be rotated up a little bit sensibly to make it less straining on the lower back, again depending on the rider's reach and feel. So whatever you do, don't leave the handlebar in a negative angle sloping forward. That's the top of the handlebar, that is. Okay, so the handlebar has been centered side to side, and the top part here with the hoods is at least level with the ground, could also be at a positive angle. We're still not done with it. The lever set, this one here and this one here, may be a little hard to reach for tiny hands, even though it's sized and designed to work for tiny hands. This, depending on a rider's shoulder width, might be just too wide and too far apart. So this may need to be turned in while this stays level or at a positive angle. And this might need to be also turned in slightly, as well as just the lever set can be raised and turned up on the handlebar. Left to right, as well as turning it up, both can be done with just using or adjusting one single bolt under the hoods here. I'm gonna need maybe two hands to peel off the hood to get to the bolt. So the clamp bolts for the lever sets, for either one of them, is on the outside. It can be accessed with some difficulty this way, peeling away this bit of handlebar tape, and the head of the bolt is underneath there. It's a stretch to get to it, and I peeled off the rubber hood from the back forward on this lever set, and on this one I peeled off obviously from the front. I peeled it backwards like so, and with a little bit of fighting you can still get to the same bolt. It's there. You can put a wrench on it in this position. It's a stretch and you're fighting the rubber hood, but that's fine. So get ready for adjusting these, maybe up for rider control and stability, and possibly in if the shoulder width of the rider is such that it's just necessary to adjust it in. So now we're done with the handlebars. Another thing not mentioned anywhere on this assembly manual is you obviously need to adjust the seat height for the riders in seam. Now, when you do that, obviously the seat needs to be, the center line of the seat needs to be in the center line of the top tube. This can be done with this simple clamp that you open, and the seat can be raised. The clamp on the other side has a lock nut, or a nut that can be loosened or it can be tightened. So if you loosen it, the clamp is barely holding anything, so that's not good. If it's over tightened, it's really difficult to do the clamp and to undo the clamp. So you have to find a right spot where this cam, this pin is off center in this cam lobe, where this cam's clamping force is just right to keep the seat in place, so it's neither turning nor sinking. So you have to find, and this might be difficult to clamp in or unclamp for the age of the rider and the size of the rider, or for the rider's hand size to get enough leverage on this with tiny fingers. So this needs to be possibly set by an adult for an adult hand size and an adult power, possibly. So you have to dial it in, tighten it just right. How much force is just good. Not this way, but with the seat in place, of course. One other adjustment with the seat, right after the seat clamp has been sorted out, is the rider's position can be adjusted and sometimes needs to be adjusted fore and aft. You see, the seat has this seat rail that's clamped by this single clamp bolt down there to this seat tube. So the seat can be adjusted easily by undoing this 6mm bolt there, and this reflector is just friction fit, and so this can be removed using two hands. If you undo this 6mm Allen key with yet another tool that's not listed in the assembly manual, then the seat can be adjusted. Now on this side of the seat you can see 5mm, 10, 15, 20, 35mm marks. These marks line up with whatever point on the seat clamp assembly here, and when this bolt is sufficiently loosened, which I have done before, you can see it very simply slides fore and aft. So this seat, as it's been test fitted to a rider, needs to move all the way forward. And when you do this, I want to point out, and just loosen it even more, you can also adjust tilt on the seat in increments. You can kind of hear the sound it makes because this serrated surface engages with, I'm going to take it all apart here just for show and tell. You don't have to, please don't, it saves yourself all the hassle of the assembly of the bits, but this is not rocket science, just in case it falls apart on you. So you can see the serrated surfaces on this part of the clamp assembly and on this one, so these will interlock wherever you set them, there or there or there, and the seat can be tilted accordingly. Now this might be pushing it, but if the rider is too far away from the handlebar, it can also be reversed and again tilted accordingly if the cutout here and this piece of hardware lines up well enough for a reverse position. So that would be forward, but that's pushing it for really riders that are super tiny for this size of frame. So again, so this is normal position, forward that way, and so tilt can be adjusted as well as the position on the seat rail, so you have to mind both. And I have to put it together. Just give me a few minutes. So this is how the seat clamp assembly looks like. Obviously the seat rails will be clamped between the upper half and the lower half. Here you can see where the seat rail is going to go, and this nut at the top has a unique shape, rounded on one side, and that round surface will need to be seated in the upper half of this clamp component here. So this is what you will have in your hand when you change the seat, if you want to change it to a different model for comfort purposes, whatever. So this, you also need to do it if you want to replace the seat can get ripped, torn, destroyed, whatever, in a fall. So this seat can be again adjusted fore and aft, and whatever you do, try to make it level like this. If you set it sloping backwards, it's usually really uncomfortable here at the front. I think I'm gonna set it horizontal, or maybe tilt it forward a little bit and pull it forward this much. So this needs to be tightened with the handy dandy 6mm Allen key, and just tightened sensibly without a torque wrench. And there, I made it level, pulled it forward as much as possible, and I made the nut properly seated, of course, in the upper clamp die. I think it's pretty obvious once you know what I'm talking about. Let's move on to brake operation. As the picture shows here, yes, there should be a clearance between the brake lever and the handlebar. If the brake lever hits the handlebar, it's too close. This is a straight handlebar in the image here, but of course the same applies to this one. This is set up correctly. The lever is not hitting the handlebar. Besides the clearance between the handlebar and the brake lever, there should be another clearance observed with the brakes, and that's visible from this position here for the front brake, and mirror opposite for the rear brake. So front and rear both need to be considered. There should be a clearance between the rim, the brake track on the rim, and the brake pad over there. So light should be coming through. There should be a visible air gap on both halves, obviously, left and right side, here at the front and at the rear, same. Especially so when the wheel is spinning, obviously, not only when the wheel is stationary. This is not how the brakes came from the factory. I had to change this using another tool. That's also not mentioned anywhere on the assembly sheet. This is a 2mm Allen key, and it adjusts the spring preload force on the brake caliper. So this is the spring, this Z shape, and this is the bolt to adjust. Not the big one, this tiny one. You'll find one for each caliper assembly. This side looks like close up. And yes, so it's tiny. Right now, the length of the bolt is about half out, half in, something like that. So right now, when everything is set up correctly, when I apply force on the brake lever, both brake calipers move approximately equal amount, like so. So both of them should be moving, and the wheel is not being rubbed by either one of the brake pads. If I mess up this setup, this Allen key or hex key is now in one of the set screws that preload the spring, and its end happens to be at the 12 o'clock position. It could be anywhere, but this is easy to see it this way. So right now the brake is set up correctly. Both sides move about 50% when the brake lever is operated. I'm gonna mess up this setting to show you. That's half a turn, one full turn, 1.5, say 2 full turns to see what happens, how this came from the factory. There, one side is moving and the other one is not moving anywhere. This is a problem because the wheel does not freely turn. It rubs on the brake pad. There is no more clearance there. There, you can hear it, you can see it, so this is not good. Now the spring preload will change over time as the material, spring material, relaxes or gives in. That's 1 full turn. That's 2 full turns back to where it works as it should. So over time, this adjustment may need to be repeated multiple times, just like by a quarter turn or maybe a half a turn, whatever, as the springs settle in operation. You see, this is still very acceptable. So this plus or minus half a turn doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I'm happy there. And the wheel turns around without hitting. So this is good. We're done with brake adjustments, but it does need this tool, and of course the description is nowhere to be found in the assembly sheet. Lastly, I had to bend the cable's end here because the length of the cable was cut in such a way that this was rubbing against the center of the tire. So just bend the wire up like so. Same at the rear brake, of course. The wire again is bent out of the way. So now that concludes the bike assembly. At the bottom of the sheet there is something about warranty, and there is another sheet in the package about warranty and another QR code about warranty. Other than that, in the package we've got all kinds of reflectors that can be applied to the bike. We have 2 strips of very short handlebar tape, I don't know what for. There's a really practical bell that sounds like this. Nice. We have spoke reflectors that are wide because on the bike we have yellow or amber ones installed, and this is the reflector that came off behind the seat. And I think the mounting of this red one can work with the mounting of this mounting bracket here. So there is an optional white one because right now there's nothing installed on the bike for a rear reflector. Besides that, there are these cable sleeves that open up, and inside there is an even smaller sleeve, and this is for running the cable maybe through these somewhere here. The long straight runs, some kind of cable protection, one there and one here, maybe if it touches the frame somewhere in that case, because everywhere else it's within a cable sleeve. So that's basically the assembly. With these you do as you please.